So I'm currently on the phone with Jimmy. He's another musician that reached out about the interview series. So I'm going to go ahead and give him the chance to introduce himself.
Hey, my name is Jamie Flaherty, also known as James. I am here with Alexander for an interview.
Excellent. Very brief. I like it. So let's go ahead and just kind of get into, the details of how you first found music. When did you first get involved in music? What about it was important enough to make you want to, create a life with it?
Well, it was several eternities ago. So my mom bought us kids a piano when I was 5 years old. And I started taking piano lessons then, and I've been playing music ever since. But it's kind of an oddball thing. After 7 years, it was discovered by my parents that I couldn't read music. After all those piano lessons, I was playing by ear. So my trick was to get the piano teacher to play the song, and then I'd go home and practice it and come back and play it perfectly. And well, it wasn't until I started getting piano lessons from a cousin, and she discovered that I couldn't read music. So the piano lessons stopped, but which was unfortunate. I actually had a full ride scholarship to Northwest Nazarene College in Idaho. But that was kiboshed by my parents. But I went to college for electronics and consumer electronics back in the 80s. And right out of college, I joined, well, actually, it was when I was in college, I joined a band. I was auditioning to play keyboards, and their lead singer didn't show up. And so they asked me if I could, just sing. I said, sure. And so they picked, I can't remember, I think it was White Wedding by Billy Idol, of all things. And halfway through the song, everybody stopped playing. And I was like, oh, man, I blew this. I was like, man, I'm really sorry. And they're like, no, we're not sorry. We just hired ourselves a new lead singer. So I ended up playing keys and singing lead with that band for about 2 years. And then out of college, I moved to Spokane, Washington. And I actually, for some odd reason, got into being a DJ in the nightclub industry. So I did that for many years. Then in 1990, I built my first studio in Spokane. And we were a 32-track digital, which at that time was pretty impressive. So we were actually probably one of the largest studios in the area. But of course, as we all know, Windows became recording on computers, through Windows became a big deal in the mid 90s. And so that studio went bust. Then I didn't really do anything until about 10 years ago. And just kind of over the years, just kind of got back into it. Now I'm running this tiny little studio, just doing production work for solo artists mostly.
Okay. So just to kind of go back a little bit, you mentioned, the band that you got into and played with for a couple of years. Was that kind of the only band that you played with, or did you try out with multiple bands and that was just the one that stuck?
Yeah, I played with two bands when I was in college. But the one that I played with the longest, the name of the band was Eliminator. Gee, I can't imagine where they got that name from. But it was a cover band. We had a fire-breathing bassist, and we were pretty crazy. Yeah. And then when I moved to sorry, that was in Idaho, in Lewiston. Sorry, wow. My brain is gone. Anyway, when I moved to Lewiston is when we opened, when I moved to Spokane is when we opened the studio. So, and then I had my own band, a 3-piece. We did Oh, kind of electronic dance music time. So kind of like New Order, that sort of thing.
Okay. And so tell me a bit about the studio that you opened. What was that process like of opening the studio? Did you have to go through a bank to get a loan, or was it more kind of underground out of your garage? What was that process like?
The first studio was pretty major, but it was all self-financed. We had a huge line of credit through a company called Hoffman Music in Spokane, uh, and that's pretty much how we did that. We were in the hole for God, probably $25,000 back in 1990. That was a lot of money for us. Um, the process, I wasn't much of a marketer, and that's probably one of the reasons why we didn't do very well. But I was also very new and very green. I look back at that first studio as a big learning experience. Uh, that's where I learned, how to do gain staging and all the things that everybody should know in this industry. Yeah, it was an expensive lesson, but
Did you have the opportunity to work with a good number of bands while you were working on that studio?
on that studio, no, pretty much my own. We recorded a band out of Portland. We just tracked them for about 5 days. They actually slept in the studio uh, the whole time they were there. So it was a big space. And when it was, oh God, yeah, I remember it being huge, and it probably was. I think it was about 3,000 square feet. It was a big studio.
Okay. And then so from there, you said that was it in Idaho, and then you moved out to Spokane, or
No,
was
that was
that in
that was in
Spokane?
Spokane.
Okay.
That was in Spokane.
Okay. And then so once you kind of had to move on from that studio, you mentioned that there was a bit of a hiatus while you kind of figured out your next moves.
Yeah, I started focusing more on the nightclub end of it. I actually started doing retail for lighting in Spokane. So we had an American DJ dealership. I was also a Bose dealer at one time there too. So that's kind of where we focused for several years after the studio kind of went bust. Because we didn't really think that there was going to be any money in recording studios at the time, because it was too easy for somebody to go out and buy a computer and just do it at home. But and it still is, but people still. So now these days, I'm more into. I mean, not only do I record, but I'm more into production work. So I do a lot of arranging and that sort of thing.
Sure, which kind of brings us up to the next question. You mentioned that after that DJ work, you kind of wanted to recreate a studio for yourself and do some work with that. So, what is the studio that you created after all that?
So yeah, after I moved from Spokane to Seattle, I worked at Microsoft for about 10 years, and then I decided, you know what, it's time. I'm done working for the man, and I'm going to get back doing what I love. So I invested into a decent Yamaha keyboard and an iMac, and got Pro Tools, and just started relearning my craft. Basically, I mean, I'd been running sound obviously on and off all that whole time, but yeah, it's a totally different atmosphere, from even though we were digital in Spokane, but this computer based recording is a totally different animal, uh, and I'm glad, because it makes my life a lot easier.
Sure. So you mentioned that now you're working on more production orientated stuff. So are you working on like client stems, things like that, or are you doing live recording?
A little bit of both, yeah. So since we basically work with solo artists, and usually people who are songwriters, uh, they'll come in with a track. Hopefully they've a scratch track is what we call it, that they've used to build whatever their song is. Sometimes they get something off of YouTube or one of these, one of these outfits that will let you use their tracks for free. And then, of course, I have to give them the bad news and say, yeah, you're not licensed to use that. So either get the license or I build you a new track. And that's how we pad the bill. But
Sure.
But so that's usually how it's done with us. I mean, sometimes we'll get people come in with tracks that they want to use, or sometimes we'll get people come in who want to just sing some karaoke tracks to share with their family for Christmas. We do that too.
So a pretty wide array of what you'll accept for work.
Yeah. And, we have a flat rate. It's $40 an hour, no matter what it is we're doing. And so, which is kind of in line pretty much with basically, we're pretty much a home studio at this point because we actually had to downsize during the COVID thing because I lost my house. But I've got her back up and going, and I'm booked pretty solid through mid-January right now. So
awesome, that's great. So with all the time that you've been working in music through the various projects that you've had, what are the memories that stand out to you that keep you motivated and want to keep doing it?
Boy, well, I think the biggest memory is the story I already told you about trying out for the band. Because it's kind of funny. When I was in high school, I was the resident pianist, and I wanted to sing, but my band director kept saying, "No, you shouldn't sing. You shouldn't sing." Well, come to find out, he didn't want me to sing because he needed a pianist, not a singer.
Sure.
So anyway, yeah, that whole audition process and having somebody say to me, several people at the same time say to me, "Gee, man, you've got a great voice," and I was like, "Holy, really? Oh, okay." So singing is probably my first love, actually, at this point. But any kind of a validation is always the thing that drives me. Sometimes you get that validation, and sometimes you don't. But when you don't, you go back and try again.
Sure. In a way, it can be its own motivation.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
And it also helps you improve. Somebody says, "Yeah, that's not so much." You go,
right,
"Okay, well,
right.
I'll go back and fix it." And I get that occasionally, even from clients. They're like, "Yeah, I don't know what it is you're trying to do there, but it doesn't work for me." I'm like, "Okay, that's why you're here."
Yeah. And that sort of input, you take that with you, and you can apply that knowledge to different scenarios once you encounter them. So what are the links for your studio and your music that you're putting out? Where can people find you?
Okay, they can find the studio on Facebook, and it's just Seattle Sound Productions. The banner is a little confusing because we're actually in the midst of starting a label called Rupert Records. So it's kind of a cross-branded thing right now. But as far as the studio, that's the only online presence. We work pretty much from word of mouth. So, which works great, when you're dealing with solo artists. I mean, I'll occasionally get phone calls from, a whole band, and I'm like, "Yeah, don't have room for a band in the studio anymore." So.
Right. Awesome. So, what's a message that you would want to put out there to other musicians listening to, give some motivation to them as well?
Boy, the motivation would be always take the positive, but listen to the negative, and don't give up on your dream, no matter what it is. And even if people tell you suck, do it anyway. I see a lot of kids who just love music, and it doesn't really matter whether they're good at it or not. If that's what makes them happy, then that's what they should do. But I think on the bigger part of that is if you know you're good and you're stuck in a 9-to-5 job because you got to pay the bills, you have to really, at some point, you have to go, okay, I need to figure out what I really want to do the rest of my life. Do I want to work at Microsoft, or do I want to play music? Because I'm going to tell you something. You're not going to be successful at both. So you got to pick one. So pick one and go with it. And hopefully you pick with the music. I did. I took that leap of faith, and I work in music 24/7. I have another music business, uh, which is a karaoke business, which may turn people off, but you got to pay the bills. So I'm able to stay involved in music 7 days a week, and I love all of it.